We are literally just over a week away from Alireza Firouzja's return to classical chess. So amazingly, he's not actually played a game in 2022. He was on such a great run in 2021, but then he didn't play in Tartar Steel. There was some controversy there. He hasn't played any other tournaments. He's just been preparing hard for the candidates, which is coming up in June. But he is playing on May the 4th in the first leg of the Grand Chess Tour. It's being held in Bucharest, Romania. Lots of top players in action, and so in preparation for that event, I want to take a look at some of Alireza's past encounters with these top guys. And I'm starting here with Levon Aronian. They always have the most amazing fighting games. This is rewinding to 2020. Alireza had white here. This is an online rapid. Let's see what happened. So he kicked off with knight to f3. Levon went pawn to d5. We had pawn g3, knight f6. The bishop came to g2, and this is the so-called King's Indian attack for white. Now Levon also went g6, fianchettoing his king's bishop, and pawn c4 now strikes at the centre. Levon took that one, and queen a4 check was played, preparing to recoup the pawn. And now Levon blocks with this knight. Might look slightly strange, moving the same piece twice in the opening, but the idea is that he wants this one to come to c6, plus now when the bishop hits g7, it's already had its eyes open down this long diagonal. So the queen took on c4 here, bishop g7, knight c3, and now this knight span round to b6, kicked the queen away, and it dropped into h4 here. Really aggressive intentions from Alireza, so he just wants to go pawn d4, land a bishop on h6, trade those ones off, then maybe knight g5 coming. Really aggressive stuff, just what you want in rapid chess. And so Levon goes pawn h6. He doesn't want that bishop landing there. Alireza goes pawn to d4, knight to c6. And now he actually just castles here. He gives black this pawn if Levon wanted to take it, which he didn't do. Then rook d1 would be the follow-up, but then black can go c5. So this is a plausible way to play, because you can take on f3 with check if white starts going pawn e3, for example. But white should be able to recoup the pawn soon, either taking on b7 at some point or following some mass liquidation on d4. White still keeps an edge here after, say, bishop to e3. So different way to play. Levon didn't want to go in for that pin. Instead, he plays with bishop to f5 here. And this move looks pretty strange because white might get e4 one day, pick up a tempo, but it has a very concrete threat. This bishop now holds the e4 square as well as g4, and we can see that the queen's actually running out of squares quite quickly. So g5 is a threat now, and you don't really want your queen kicked into h5, then it's getting boxed in. Queen d7 or queen c8 could be coming, preparing bishop to g4. Now the most solid way to respond to this would be with, say, queen to f4, just preparing to bring it back into the game. But Alireza goes for the most aggressive move here, as is his style. He goes pawn to g4. Excellent move. So it kicks the bishop back, and now the queen has some space here. Now queen g3 immediately was actually the best move, because now you prevent pawn to e5. That one can just be captured, and also the queens aren't staring at each other after the e5 move is played. What Alireza did was go rook to d1 immediately, but now Levon can play pawn to e5 because the queens are staring down, black can get the break in, and Alireza goes queen to g3 here. Once again, the most aggressive move, keeping pieces on the board, keeping attacking chances alive. And now here we had the captures on d4 and knight b5. So Alireza is attacking two pawns. This one on d4, this one on c7. You can't defend both, so Levon actually just castles the king, gets it to safety, asks Alireza how he wants to play, and once again Alireza goes for the more aggressive continuation. You could take on d4 here with a very solid game, but he chops on c7, hits that rook on a8. It comes into c8 here, and then he comes back to b5, looking at this pawn here, looking at d6, also d4. That knight's really dangerous, and so Levon kicks it with pawn to a6. It's not necessarily the best move, but this is rapid chess. The players are making very quick decisions. And here Alireza takes on d4. If he comes into d6, by the way, it's not really going anywhere. The rook can come to c7. And if you try bishop to f4, attacking it like this, well, then this knight hits d5. Black's doing okay. So we didn't have this knight d6 move. Alireza simply chopped on d4 here. The knight recaptured, knight takes, and now bishop to a4 from Levon. A great move, targeting this rook, also opening the queen. And now Alireza once again plays in the most aggressive way, the most tactical. Now you could go rook d3 here. You come away from the attack. You hold this knight. If bishop takes, then we've got things like pawn e3. But what Alireza did was go pawn to b3 here. But this is very tactical, of course, because you open this long diagonal to the undefended rook. And Levon actually takes that knight on d4. Yes, he's walking into a pin, but exploiting that is not so straightforward. So can you see the best move for white here, which Alireza found? And if you're enjoying this video, do hit that like button, let me know, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already to never miss my coverage of an Alireza game. So the best move here for white is actually takes on h6. If you go pawn e3, by the way, this is terrible because the bishop can take on a1. Yes, you pick up the queen, but then black takes on c1 with check. You have to block with the bishop. I mean, you could go with the rook, but then you just lose your rook. Now the rook takes here, and this one's coming down. Then you'll be winning the bishop. It's just completely over. Massive material advantage for black. So pawn e3 is no good. Alireza went bishop takes on h6. So he hits this rook on f8. Now if Levon moves it to e8, then you can take on a4. Black could recapture with the knight. And white's got a good game here. A pawn up, bishop pair, open board. Good for white. So Levon didn't go rook to e8. Instead he went queen f6 here. It breaks the pin. Also attacks this rook now with queen and bishop. But Alireza ignores it. He goes pawn to g5. Kicks the queen back. It goes to h8, maintaining the battery down the long diagonal. And now rook a to c1. Still Alireza doesn't take this bishop. He moves this away, challenges the c file. Levon saves the bishop, so Alireza is a piece down now for 2 pawns. But excellent play now. He invades with queen to d6. And this is just a monster move. It hits this minor piece, plus this one, plus this one. Also pressures the f8 square, which is being hit by the bishop. Just a beautiful geometry, very centralized queen. And it's now actually impossible to save a piece. So bishop g7 is the best move, suggested by the computer, but then Alireza can chop this one off. Say queen recaptures. You can take on c8 here. Now if the knight recaptures, you're dropping your bishop. Let's say the bishop takes, then you're dropping your knight. White's just 2 pawns ahead here, dominant position, b7's threatened. Great position for white, should be winning. So we didn't have bishop g7 played. Levon tried bishop g4 instead to save that bishop, but now Alireza simply chopped on c8. You can't take with the knight, or the queen takes on f8. So the rook recaptured, but now this rook took on d4, picks up the dark squared bishop. Rook c1 check came. This one dropped back, and now Levon blunders in the time trouble. He goes queen a1, hitting that back rank, threatening to take here, but completely forgetting about queen to f8 check. And here he just resigned. If he goes king to h7, we take on f7, checking the king, and the whole thing is falling apart. It's about plus 10, 11 to white. Devastating, classic, aggressive Alireza. If you enjoyed this video and want to see my Alireza versus Ivanchuk match, click here. Thanks for watching, see you soon.